prisons and forced psychiatric institutions, or even homeless shelters. Not just looking at those institutions and figuring out ways to dismantle them, to change them in ways that have an end to abolishing them, but also figuring out ways that our relationships with each other don't model what the state's logic is about who's disposable, who's expendable. And to me, that's part of what it means to prefigure the world that you want to live in. It means that the process that you're taking to transform your community is as important as the end that you want to have in your community. Meaning, a way to get rid of violence in the community by not calling the cops is not, to me, to replicate harm in a relationship. It is to have accountability, right? To talk to people about why they might have done it, but it's not to send someone out and make them feel shameful or make them feel like they don't belong or that they have no part in a repairing process. So that's why abolition is important to me. It's about dismantling and abolishing structures of violence that are in our communities that are really harming and targeting us, or that we have to navigate their harm, their violence. And it's also about trying to build relationships within community that are modeled on a different politic, a different logic, not the logic of punishment, not the logic of exile, but that belief that we're all indisposable, that we're all vital to creating community with each other.
Okay, so I wanted to end with the words of these, I think, thoughtful, provocative scholar activists. I realize I've been very schematic. There's much I've left out. In providing this kind of sweeping overview, my primary goal has really been to open the question of the relation of different iterations of anarchism and Black liberation struggles. I hope you'll agree that it's at least a generative question, not simply of academic interest, but also of practical concern today. I'm happy to stick around and talk with folks. We might have to leave the room, but I don't have anything to do this afternoon. I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. I have a couple of my books up in the back, and I'd like to buy one. They're cheaper today than on the internet. Thanks very much for taking the time and listening to me today.
Questions?
Do you have a few minutes for questions?
Yeah, we've got a few minutes.
All right. We can start barging in.
I had a question. First of all, thanks for contributing to such an important and often neglected topic. And my question was, if you could comment a little bit about what's happening in Rojava in northern Syria now, and how that model there could apply to what you talked about today.
Yeah. So in northern Syria, there are a group of Kurdish people who are involved in a process of armed self-defense from a whole variety of actors, including ISIS, including the Syrian and Turkish states. And they have started adopting some ideas forwarded starting in the 70s and 80s by the theorist Murray Bookchin, who I mentioned, who is one of the theorists of against social domination and social hierarchy. So some of the leadership there has taken up some of his ideas and have developed their thinking and organizing strategies from a more traditional kind of guerrilla warfare and Marxist style strategy. And as I understand it, and I'm not 100% up to date, but the idea is trying to kind of transform their own society kind of behind the front lines as they're arming themselves to kind of defend and carve out a space of autonomy in that very fraught area. So putting forward feminist projects, new education projects, kind of cooperative economics, and trying to think about the environment. And they see themselves related to and connected to the Zapatista struggle in Mexico, to other places. I heard that they reached out to a group operating in Mississippi these days that I just had some interactions with, Cooperative Jackson, which is another kind of moment of this kind of transformation and taking up of anarchist ideas and strategies. There's a group that kind of come out of the Black liberation struggle in Jackson, people involved with like the Republic of New Africa, and dating back all the way to some folks involved in SNCC. Right now what they're trying to do is to create a sense of economic autonomy and self kind of auto-development by buying up land, creating a cooperative farm, and getting some money to invest in small democratically run businesses and things like that. So I think these are kind of models that are taking off around the world that say we can't just keep fighting to try to capture state power. We need to transform social relationships right now. I'm pretty inspired by what's going on in Rojava because they're doing it in such a hostile climate. There's a lot of questions, and there's been some sense that they folks there have allied with the U.S. state in fighting ISIS, and some comments about unsavory alliances with the Assad regime. I don't know the extent to that, but at least over the last few years, I think that they've kind of shown something of a new way forward, an experiment. That's about all I have on that. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, to what extent, historically at least in the mid-century, do we see examples of the state? So I mean, obviously, anarchist movements position themselves in direct antagonism to the state. Whereas when we think about larger, say, black and brown movements in general, not necessarily like positioning them in terms of like specific politics.
Sure.
To what extent has have you found examples of the state attempting to co-opt types of black and brown movements? And I just think about, because of the fact that, like, today when we think about doing organizing in the conditions of the multicultural project and doing work as an anarchist and a Chicano myself, recognizing that today the climate is actually the competition in terms of kind of in terms of politics is actually less around like struggling with, say socialist groups, social democratic groups, communist groups, as doing like anarchist work, right? And more kind of trying to combat a lot of the neoliberal multicultural project that is kind of essentially co-opting would-be radicals into these types of institutionalized spaces. Right. And then using a lot of folks who are like mobilizing social justice language essentially against radical projects. Yeah. And I'm wondering, to what extent is this just like a totally new phenomenon? Which my kind of read is that it is like a very new thing, especially if we think about the way in which the state historically has in the same way that it's directly antagonized anarchist groups, it's directly antagonized and excluded, communities of color, right? But maybe I guess the question is is this really as new of a phenomenon as it seems, or do we see these types of things going on?
Right. I think it's a new iteration on something of an old pattern. In a variety of local movements for Black lives, this is an issue that's coming up. In Minneapolis is one of the most explicit examples. Of course, I think in Oakland, California, around Occupy, some conversations coming out of the inauguration protests, where where there's been something of a kind of split amongst the direction that Movement for Black Lives and some related organizations are going to go in. And a critique has come out, just as you're saying, that a lot of this is trying to be recuperated, to kind of tamp down on the radicalism of it, and that's something really to watch out for. There's, for example, a number of articles and essays coming out of Minneapolis of some folks who identify explicitly as black anarchists, and putting that critique out of what they saw as the leadership of the local Black Lives Matter movement. I think the critique is not all that new. It used to be run mostly against labor unions rather than nonprofits. I think the big move is that what is seen as this kind of key, decisive, progressive institution of power that either could be revolutionary, that anarchists see as either potentially revolutionary or potentially co-optive and kind of recuperative, has changed from being labor unions now to nonprofit organizations. I personally think that that criticism is somewhat overplayed by anarchists. Has been historically. Almost across the board, anarchists will say, oh, anytime there's a kind of organization that's a stable organization, you have a paid staff member, organizer, or someone that has a title of chair or leader or something like that, that's automatically going to corrupt them, that they are going to be sucked up by power, they're going to sell out the movement, they're going to cut short the revolutionary potential of the masses. It assumes that the masses always already have that revolutionary will. And I just think that's not true. I think that has to be constructed. I think that is, it's a longer conversation, but the kind of post-structuralist turn in thinking about where do political identities and desire to confront power come from. I think it has to be constructed. I think leaders can do some good in constructing that. I think they absolutely, whether a leader of a union or a nonprofit, can sell out people and take kind of half measures, but you shouldn't expect that they're always going to do that. And I think that the history of anarchism has shown that there's just as much problem of having supposedly no leadership and no structure when you have an informal, always you're going to have an informal kind of leadership develop, and that causes its own problems. So it's there. I don't think it's that new. I wish people would kind of look at the pattern and be a little bit more specific about their accusations.
Well, we're going to have to call it a close, but if you'd like to carry on the conversation, we're going to go off to lunch, hang out here if you want, and the books are for sale in back, and thanks a whole lot, Hank.
I would encourage you to remember that an aspect in light of the 19th century post-Civil War relationship between anarchist agitators for abolition and church groups agitating for abolition. He brought this up as what is this cleavage that's keeping those two things right? And it's written. And so I don't know if I colonial